A big hello and a very warm welcome to Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Today with me is a very senior executive from Maruti, and we're going to be discussing everything in terms of what's happening in Motown, whether it be the health of Motown in today's day and age, or it be how we're transitioning to EVs, or the fact that cars versus small cars and hatchbacks and sedans versus SUVs, the entire industry health, and of course Maruti Suzuki, which is the leading car maker of the country. All that is in focus today, and joining me today is none other than the Senior Executive Director Shashank Srivastava of Marketing and Sales, joining me right here in the Brand Equity studio. Thank you so much, Shashank. Truly a pleasure having you in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Let me just first start off, Shashank, as somebody who understands this industry better than most people. How is the festive season, now that we're in the post-Diwali phase, actually been for the industry?
Yeah, so the festive season this year has been actually a record-breaking one in terms of sales. For the first time ever, the sale in the festive period crossed the 1 million mark, which is actually estimated to be 1.13 million, which is the first time it's crossed 1 million. The previous highest being 9,34,000, which was in 2020. But of course, the festive period this time was a little longer. And remember, the festive period is defined from the first Onam day,
in August,
which is 17th August, till the Bhai Dooj period, which ended just on the 15th of November. So this was this time 90-day period. So it was more than the normal period of the duration was a little longer. Last it was 71 days. So maybe it's not really comparable, but if you look at the total sales, gone up 41% growth. And if you remove the effect of the large number of days, it's about 15% up.
Wow. And if I talk about Maruti's performance in particular? Yeah,
so Maruti's sale in this period was about 4,90,000. This compares quite well with last year's 3,55,000, and that means we also had a similar growth, in fact slightly higher growth than the industry, which means that our market share went up a little bit from about 41.6 last year to almost 43 this year.
Last year, I think last two consecutive years, if I'm not mistaken, September had been blockbuster for you. This time it's October.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
You had a great bonanza in October.
Yes.
This is all thanks to the festive period?
Yes, and also remember that this year has actually been a record-breaking one for the industry as generally. So if you look at the calendar year, starting with January, it was the best ever January, the best ever February, best ever March, best ever April, May, June, July, August, September, October, everything was the best. And this is the first time actually that the industry in 9 months period, Jan to September, crossed the 3 million mark, which was like first time ever, and it looks like in this calendar year we should be around the 4.1 million mark, only the first time that industry will cross the 4 million mark.
So that's really encouraging news coming from Motown, given the fact that the industry has gone through such challenging and turbulent times. But if I just have to deep dive onto these fantastic numbers that you've cited, what do you think the reason for this great spurt in growth has been? Has it been the fact that there's been a lot of pent-up demand, and that is why you're seeing this kind of spurt? And is it possible to kind of maintain this momentum, or are we at our peak?
I think it's a great question. We keep examining exactly this every day. In growth terms, it's not been so great. So we had a growth of about 23-24% in the industry previous year. This year the growth is around 8%. So it's not that really great. And if you compare the 5-year period, the last 5 years, the CAGR is just around 4.1%. So there is surely therefore an element of pent-up demand in what we see today. And the 2 years actually from 1920 was a slightly depressed year in terms of sales. 2021, 22 were the COVID period, and we had supply chain disruption. And you would have heard that the semiconductor crisis was there. So in July of this year, we could manage to overcome that crisis. and the entire industry could produce many more vehicles, from what was earlier with long waiting periods and long pending bookings. Maruti had almost close to 400,000 bookings pending. Sure. We could make, fortunately, in this period, the vehicles as per the demand of the consumers, bringing down the waiting periods, and that obviously adds to the volumes. So your volume have to be looked in this perspective.
Sure.
The long term really not so great. 4.1% growth the last 5 years is CAGR is not extraordinary. But of course, India became the third largest passenger vehicle market in the world. That was like fantastic.
Sure. Now, this semiconductor shortage that we all saw, and while yes, that has come down significantly, is it true that, from, let's say, before the semiconductor shortage, the average waiting period for a car was about 15 to 20 days, as opposed to now, which has become the normal, the new normal is about 30 to 35 days. Have we kind of closed in on this crisis, or this is an ongoing?
It looks like more or less, although, we don't have a window, or we can't see much beyond a couple of months in terms of the semiconductor supplies even today, but it seems to have eased. And from July onwards, as I just mentioned, we have seen great production actually. Sure. And Maruti Suzuki, for example, we just missed the 2 lakh mark of last month. So the production is great, and that is why the waiting periods have come down. Okay. And it was estimated that just in July there were about 7.5 to 800,000 bookings pending in the industry. Maruti Suzuki had almost 400,000. It's come down now because industry is now able to supply vehicles as per the consumer demand.
Okay. Now, talking about consumer demand, right? I know that your strategy, Maruti Suzuki strategy on the whole SUV category has been very focused, and you're reaping the results of that. Yeah. We've seen so many launches from you and that performance. Yeah. I'd like you to shed light on your SUV category performance. But I also want to look at the at the middle market, which is really the hatchback and the small cars, and even the sedan, and that story there. But first, I'd like to hear from you on the SUV market, and why is there such a boom that we've seen till date in terms of course, we've seen so many launches, and almost all players, including your competitors, are focusing on that category. Yeah. Why has that category suddenly kind of, shown so much potential?
Yeah, so actually it's been a bit of a surprise for us as well. Normally we are very, very closely connected with consumers all the time, doing research, and generally speaking, that's been the strength of Maruti Suzuki, and we've been able to reap the benefits also by introducing products which have generally been very successful. And this is one trend which we spotted, but what was unexpected was the rate at which the SUVs grew. So we knew the SUV segment was growing. The consumers prefer it because the ground clearance is large. So on an Indian roads, it is so much better to have large ground clearance. The driving position is quite upright, okay, and that gives you that sense of control in the congested roads of our country. Also, there is some sort of a status attached with owning, and you give that feeling that you are a sporty and slightly, you have reached some place, and that's one of the
status symbol.
Yes, it's sort of a status symbol as well. Also, the interior space in a SUV has much more flexibility compared to a sedan. So sedan, you have that box at the back, which is the boot, and you can't really use it unless you are putting some things in it. But in case of a SUV, you can actually have, you can just roll down the seats, and you can actually have it a large luggage space, or if you're not using the luggage space, you can use that interior space. You can't use the boot space,
Sure.
So SUVs grew, and the unexpected part was it grew very rapidly. So just to give you an idea of how SUVs have grown, they were like just around 15-16% of the market in 2017 or so. Then they became 22%. In 1920, they were around 30%. Then they became 34% in 2021. Wow. 21-22, they became 40%. 22-23, they became 43%. And this year, they are very close to 50%, 49%.
You're saying 50% of the industry currently is SUV?
Yeah. And just to give you an idea of the volumes, percentages sometimes can be misleading. Volumes, they were in that range of 7.5 lakh till 18-19. Then suddenly became 8 lakh, 1920, then 12 lakh in 2021, 16 lakh last year. This year they are expected to cross 2 million. So that's like a huge growth. This is unexpected. So what has happened really, and coming to the Maruti's strategy, so when we look at it, our midterm goal actually is to get to 50% market share. So in 50% market share, when you analyze it segment wise, in the non-SUV space, our market share is 70%.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like really good, really good. And you can't really grow much from here beyond 70%. In fact, vans, we have a 95%, 94% market share. It's very large. So, but when you combine it with SUV, our SUV market share last year quarter one was about 8.5%. So when you combine the two, it falls to about 43, 42%.
Correct. Yeah.
So one of the ways by you get to 50% is to have a bigger market share in the SUV segment. That was very clear. We had only one product, Brezza. Brezza, by the way, has been the best-selling SUV. Even this year, it is the number one SUV in the country. Across all categories of SUVs, it's the number one. So it can do only as much. And it was giving us 8.5% market share because the number of SUVs in that category were about 45, 46.
Sure.
And we had only one product. So obviously, if you want to get more market share, you would like to strengthen your portfolio.
Absolutely.
And that's what we did. In September, we introduced the Vitara, and as you rightly pointed out, we brought in new vehicles in the SUV category, the Fronx and the Jimny this year. With the result that we are able to, our market share went up to almost, it's now about 23, 24%.
Wow.
And we are the number one manufacturer of SUV. If you look at the H1 of this year, we are now the number one manufacturer of SUV. That's why our market share has gone up. But the thing is that SUV segment has grown immensely. So this is obviously very, very important for us, not just, and we are keeping a very close watch on it, because while it's crucial for our success on the market share front, it's also important because we are now seeing sub-segments emerging in the segment, and we need to position our brand accordingly, need the products and the brand positioning in the minds of the consumers, and that's what we are trying to do.
Sure. Well, congratulations on that fantastic play of SUV, right? From having one model to now a plethora of models. So, outstanding work by Maruti and yourself. But if I just had to look at this SUV spurt that we've seen in the country, and if I compare it to other categories, not automobile, but generally, the story so far seems to be that the middle market, India's middle market versus, let's say, the top of the pyramid, the premium story is showing a much more robust kind of story and a much more profitable story than middle India. Consumption per se seems to have kind of gone down. It's dimmed a bit. Consumer sentiment not that great. And would you say we're seeing the same kind of behavior mirroring Motown? Because if you look at the small car and the hatchback and the sedan segment, not such a colorful story after all. But the SUV, which is, it's a premium product, seems to be on a rampage. When you're saying 50%, wow, that's really quite jaw-dropping. Would you say I'd be accurate in saying that?
Yeah, so partly I think, because there are a combination of factors at work. So, by the way, the SUVs, the entry SUV, for example, which is 50% of the SUV market, is about 25% of the overall market.
Got it.
Yeah. So, the price point is not really premium. It actually overlaps the price points of the premium hatch and even the entry sedans. Okay. So, there is some sort of a cross consideration which is going between hatch and sedan versus the entry SUV. Entry SUV, in fact, the first time buyer, which were earlier completely in favor of hatches and entry sedan, almost 31% of the first time buyers now get into the SUV. So SUV space has that 31% is the first time buyer. So, and that is because the cross consideration is because of the overlapping price points. However, that is one part. The other part, in which you are right, is that at the lower end, the entry hatches, for example, there is it has gone down. It was about 45-46% of the market just 3-4 years back. It's now about 29-30%. So it's gone down. Sedan actually has gone down even more. At its peak in 2017, it was about 24% of the market. It's now less than 9% of the market. So that's a big drop. So one is clearly a body type preference for SUV, that's clear. But at the same time, the other thing which you said is about affordability. And what has happened in recent times is that we have seen, because in response to the various factors like regulatory stringency or commodity prices going up, or such factors as road tax, registration tax going up, the prices of the lower end cars have, as a percentage terms, gone up much higher than the rise in income in those categories. As a result, affordability factor has come down, and that has seen that's reflected in the downslide in terms of the sales. In fact, at its peak, hatches were about 15 lakh 60,000 of the market. Now they are like about last year about 13 lakh 40,000. So they have lost quite a bit. But what I believe is, and we think, we are still examining it, of course, I think this segment can come back. Because the regulatory stringency, which was like really heavy in the last few years, is now sort of plateaued. And we believe that the income levels post-COVID period of this category, of the lower end of the spectrum, will go up. As a result, affordability factor will actually improve from here. And you know, India, 65% of the population is below 35 years of age, demographically speaking. There are a lot of first-time buyers. And there is therefore, whenever the economy grows, there is a requirement for transportation. Public transportation is not so great in our country. Therefore,
even with the emergence of, you know, this shared mobility like Ubers and Olas and, you know.
Uber, Olas are roughly about, the entire fleet sales is about, during COVID times is about 2%. It's now gone up to about 5.5%. So it's not so great compared with other countries.
So you would not attribute the emergence of these players for the,
No, it doesn't look like. There was a time in 19 when we were examining it really in detailed way, because Uber, Olas were climbing at a very high rate, almost 6-7% of the market. But really that, but I think because personal transportation requirement will always be there, and in India there is a status still attached with owning a car. You know, unlike some other large cities like New York or Tokyo, where it's more fashionable to be seen on a bicycle or traveling, you know, but it's different in case of our country, still a status symbol to own a car. So I think the demand will be there, and once the affordability factor increases, I think this small car segment you may see a bounce back in this segment.
Okay, great. Now, I'm very interested in what you said about demographics, right? Like you said, 35-year-olds are dominant. I mean, below 35 is dominant in the country. Do you see a change of mindset from, let's say, a few generations before to now in terms of ownership, right? So ownership of home, ownership of vehicle, all of that was a sign of that you are settling down and you're stable in life, right? Do you see the mindset of the today's 35 and minus looking at ownership as a symbol of stability, or ownership as a symbol of liability?
Again, great question. And I think you know, it's we have been doing a lot of research on this new generation of consumers. They are quite different. Of course, they are more aspirational compared with the functionality, which was the main criteria of car purchase earlier on. You needed transportation. So, but in this case, it is like more aspirational. It's still status is involved in case of what car you are driving. The choice is much more now because the market is larger. In terms of the car penetration, as you rightly pointed out, the car penetration now is very high. I mean, very high means in what it was earlier. So in the early 80s, mid 80s type, it was just around 2 vehicles per 1,000 of population. It's now almost 32 now. So it's like really going up. There's a big upside to it because the developed countries like the US have almost 700, 800 cars per 1,000. So there is a big upside, and that's why all the OEMs are bullish about the Indian market. So I think this is important. When we look at this generation, you need to look at their specific aspirations, also their specific choices. So earlier you had the Maruti 800, where everybody used to whether you are a bureaucrat or a
Yeah,
film
true.
star or a young guy or an old guy, the Maruti 800 was the symbol of transportation, personal transportation. But now because the volumes grew, you have the emergence of sub-segment. So you have a family car, you have cars where like the Ertiga, for example, people used to go out together with friends. Earlier, so these choices, these needs have emerged because of the growing economy and the different mindset. And it's not just that. We as marketers, we have to look at it not only in terms of the products that they buy, the type of technology they want, the features they want, that's specific to the product. But also, if you look at the media consumption, for example, and that's important because you need to, for getting the message across, the communication, you have to make choice of media. Media is now quite, the consumption of media in the younger people is quite different from what it used to be earlier. Sure. The buying process itself is quite different. It's more digitized now compared with what it used to be earlier, which was largely physical. Now, in fact, it has become almost all aspects of car buying is digitalized, and we can discuss that. But when you talk of ownership itself, the pattern of ownership is also changing, in the sense the younger buyers in our research, especially in the larger cities, they want a asset light usage of assets, of products, which means they don't want to own it. They are open to get it on subscription. So we have a subscription program, for example, where you just pay a monthly rent and car is yours. You don't have to bother about insurance, finance, etc. So we see that trend. In fact,
really?
So it's emerging. It's emerging, but it's a clear trend, and we have therefore in 2020 we introduced this product. We used to do about first year we did about 80 cars. Now we are doing like 500 cars a month under subscription. And how it came out, in our research we found young people, like nobody understands them, so we thought we'll try to understand them and got this research going. And a lot of people said that even for their, for example, some of the young girls, they said even for their marriage lehenga, they would take it on rent. Whereas, in my case, for example, that lehenga, my marriage lehenga is still there, preserved by my wife.
Waste of money.
So they consider it waste of money, whereas I consider it to be like a really this thing. And in fact, for example, my wife plans ki this lehenga has to be given to the daughter when she gets
legacy
married.
Item, yeah.
So it was like that. And the entire family would discuss कि यार लहंगा लाल का ऐसा होना चाहिए, उसमें ये लगना चाहिए, but it is no longer the case. They are saying they are going to rent it. Even fridge and television and all, these young people, they are saying they will rent it, and therefore we have to change as marketers to adjust to this pattern. Whether it is the digital platforms we are creating for the process of buying, or even the type of ownership. So we are doing a lot of work in that area, and we are trying to cope up with this fast changing generation. Hopefully we will do a good job of it.
The next focus that I want to deep dive into is, of course, EVs. I mean, it seems to be the talk of the town. However, I'm not sure whether that talk is actually going to translate into adoption, simply because of the set of challenges we have in this country. I know that you are very, planned and strategic about your EV launches. We're going to see your launch as fast as next year, right? Yeah. And you've also stated that by 2030, you'll have, at least 25% of your portfolio, which will be EV?
About 20,
Okay, 20%, right? I have a couple of questions. One is, that's great. We're seeing the industry focus on that, and that seems to be the pressure from the governments as well. Yeah. But do you see the average Indian consumer adopting EV as an option? And do you think the infrastructure currently, or even the future plan of infrastructure being met to enable sales of new launches from your stable or others? And thirdly is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the entire EV launches and the profitability of EV has still not been cracked by most OEMs. So it will kind of hit back on your balance sheet.
So first of all, compliments to you, Sonali. I think you have done really deep research, because whatever you said is actually true. That's also our study says, which is that while in the long run, as the emission norms get tighter, in order to meet those norms, people are seeing EVs as a frontline technology which will meet those, which will enable automobiles to meet those emission norms. We do see that there will be a mix of technologies in the intervening period before EVs become mainstream. So there seems to be consensus in the industry that EVs will become really large. The adoption rate will go up as we go along, but there is no consensus as to when that's going to happen. And it varies from country to country.
Sure.
And for us, we believe that by 2030, the EV industry in the country would have a penetration of roughly around 18 to 20%. And it's not very large compared to, let's say, today you have Germany at 18, 20. You even have Thailand at around 8 or 9. We have Norway at 80% plus. 80% plus is Norway. France, Germany, it's the highest, of course. Netherlands and Norway are the two things. But the infrastructure for charging is very important. You really made it a great point. First of all, you have to crack the affordability part.
It will be more expensive.
Absolutely. And EVs, 50% of the cost of making an EV is actually battery cost. And battery is not yet localized, which means if you have to do a localization of the battery, if you are to price it competitively. We are trying to do that. Suzuki has invested almost 10,000 crores in battery and components related plant to enable that. Localization is very important. Second, the charging infrastructure. It takes a long time to charge a battery of a car because it's a big battery.
Sure.
So
how long does it take?
It takes, depending on the size of the battery, let's say if you have a charger at home, it's about 3.3 kilowatt. So if you have a 60 kilowatt battery, it will take 60 divided by 3.3, approximately 12, 13 hours, 14 hours to charge. You may have a fast charger like a 7 kilowatt, this thing that will take about 7, 8 hours to charge a 60 kilowatt battery. Of course, batteries are smaller also, but then the range is small. So consumers get what is known as range anxiety. Yeah. That is, you are afraid to go out for a distance because you don't know when
it will die.
Yeah, and it's not like a petrol pump where you can just stop and fill up the gasoline in 2 minutes because the charging time is more. So you only do emergency charging on the on the way, if at all you find a charging infrastructure. You normally do it at home. That's what.
Yeah.
But in India, about less than 50% of the people have definite parking space.
Sure.
Every night when they park the vehicle, and that's of course one of the constraint. So a combination of this constraint makes EV adoption rate in India probably going to be much slower. Yeah. We are going to introduce the EV, as you rightly said, next year, and one of the big preparations we are doing is how to provide consumers a convenient experience in terms of a charging infrastructure.
But that's not really up to you, right? I mean, in the sense that you can launch a top of the line EV car, but if the consumer has no place to park or charge and has a mindset issue, what can you as a player do?
Yeah, so great. So that's why the adoption rate may not be so
then
high.
Then why launch? Is it the pressure because that's the way forward?
No pressure, but because in our portfolio it's going to be about 15-17% by the time it's 2030. We'll have about 25% strong hybrid in our portfolio, and that's one of the big things which is happening. You can have a strong hybrid where the car runs on battery most of the time, about 40-50% of the time, and it gives you that feeling of a EV performance, but you don't require a charging infrastructure because the battery charges using the regenerative energy of the brakes whenever you brake. So that's the reason why hybrids are becoming much more common now. In fact, last month the sale of hybrids was higher than the sale of EVs, but still the percentage in EVs penetration is just around 2.1% now. For hybrids, about 1.9, 1.8%. So we believe a mix of technologies will exist till the time that all these problems get sorted out. And of course, you need to be present in the segment. But when more interestingly, and I want to respond to that, is when you talked about whether there is a pressure of optics. So clearly there are many manufacturers who will bring in cars, technology wise it's available. So you can bring in a car, launch it for optics, and that's it. But I can tell you, because I have been in Maruti Suzuki for a very long time, I can tell you that we have this debate on not only this issue, but we have so many debates on so many other issues, where between optics and customer convenience, I can tell you 100 times out of 100, Maruti will choose customer convenience, not optics. This is very clear to us. And therefore, while people say, oh, you should have got an EV, you are a market leader, you should have got, but we believe customer convenience is very important, and you have to be sure that consumers are not inconvenienced when you sell a product to them, including, for example, the installation of charging at home, for example. So it's not that you just give a charger to the people and please you can install it. You have to make sure that it's convenient to them.
Yeah. Looking like a tough road ahead for the EV story to evolve in India. But let's just talk about the growth of the auto industry, right? So my question is pointed. We've seen it do have a bonanza year this year, with all the figures that you gave, not only for Maruti but the industry. Yeah. But do you see now the SUV category, which is really spurting the growth for the industry, kind of now tempering down? Because launches have happened. The next launch, I think we're awaiting only in October of 24. The cars, the products are on the road, and consumers have done what they have to do. Now are we going to see this growth kind of temper down?
Sonali, I think I will make an offer to you for you to join Maruti Suzuki, because you're like really you have hit the nail. Our research shows that generally speaking, when we look at other countries, the tapering seems to be happening around that 54-55% mark. So when you look at Latin America, you look at Brazil, you look at other countries, Poland, Mexico, China, and other things. So we believe that tapering may happen around the 54-55% mark. Going forward. Sure. And while hatches will remain at this as a percentage of the industry, our projection is that the hatches in terms of the absolute volumes will actually increase, because remember in 2030 the projection we are making for the industry is 6 million cars for the passenger vehicles from the current levels of 4 million cars that we will see in this year. So India is a growing economy, growing country, population is increasing, so we believe volumes will come. As a percentage you might see, but yes, you are right. We do see that SUVs going forward might sort of taper at around hit a plateau at around 54-55%.
So then where is the next bright spot which will kind of give that impetus to Motown?
Yeah, so if you look at current year, you see early signs of MPVs growing. MPVs are like the 3-row multi-people thing. So those are the two categories which have grown this year. So this year, while we see these large volumes, I mentioned that, actually it's only on the back of growth of SUVs and MPVs. SUV growth is about 27%, MPV growth about 9%, but we can see the sign, the percentage terms of the overall market, the MPV market also going up. You could see, for example, a crossover market developing, which is like between a hatch and a SUV. A type of body class which is there, for example, in Europe doing quite well. So we are going in that direction in terms of the external body shape, and of course in terms of technology is going to be different. As we just discussed, powertrains will be different. Today CNG is doing very well, for example, diesel is coming down. So we will see changes of powertrain and technology as well. Features are different now. Earlier, I remember it was for me when I was young, when we had the car, and we thought it was a great feature. You just have the power window, and otherwise you have to roll it up and down. And now you can't. You can't really imagine doing this. There were vehicles without AC, for example, or music system, but today it's all connected. Sure. So it's changing. And I guess those changes will reflect in the type of choices consumers will make going forward.
Shashank, my conversation across industries apart from automobile have shown that 24-25 are going to be tough years for industries. Would you say that is coming along for Motown as well?
Yes and no, actually. As I said, the underlying economy, if it's growing, it's very positive for the industry. I just told you we are looking at 6 million sale for the industry by 2030. The demographics, the car penetration, the motorization in our country, the direction in which it is going, the rural areas where you see a larger penetration now. So it does point out to a very good growth in the industry. However, and you rightly pointed out, there are some ifs and buts, especially in the next couple of years, including, for example, the interest rates. You see a persistent inflation, although the inflation figure yesterday were showing on the retail inflation, a little easing a little bit. But I think underlying thing is that you still might see persistent inflation, which means the bank rates are going to stay high for a longish period.
Food inflation.
Food inflation, which obviously reflects in the inflation. Kharif production is expected to be lower. This time the monsoons are at 94% of the long-term average, so about 6% down. The reservoirs are, water reservoirs are a little less. That might affect the Rabi sowing, which is happening now. So you might see that food inflation as a because of this, the Kharif production being less and the Rabi sowing itself might be lower. So you could see persistent inflation, which means in our industry, 80% of the retail happens through auto financing, the retail financing. So ultimately, these rate increases get built into the retail finance rates, and that obviously is a negative. Fuel prices are a big negative for the industry. If prices go up, the geopolitical situation might affect that. Commodities can be really volatile, which means you can see a very tough time in terms of pricing and costing for the industry. So these are on one front. On the positive front, of course, if the economy grows, there is a.
But that is my moot question to you, which is, economy, the whole world is slowing down. Yes, we're a brighter spot because we are slowing at a lesser pace. The fact of the matter is the average Indian's wallet has not increased. Right? If you look at increments this time across the board, or you look at the kind of amount that is going in for your household expenditure, your wallet, your discretionary spends have really come down. So yes, there's one end of India which is ruling the roost, and that is why we can see in premium and luxury categories things going up. But overall, average India's wallet has not gone up. So how does one say that India is in a good spot?
Yeah, so India, I think generally
speaking, maybe.
Not just relative, yes, relatively speaking, of course, but not just in relatively speaking terms. A growth of 6.5, 6.7% would ultimately obviously push up the income levels, and these are like real GDP growth. The real GDP per capita income is very closely correlated with automobile sales. In fact, if not just in India, across the world, and statistics show that the correlation factor, the R square as they call it for the mathematically oriented, the regression, when you do a regression analysis, the R square factor of anything above 0.75 is considered to be a close correlation. In this case, with auto sales versus the GDP per capita income growth, the correlation is as high as 0.9836, which is like a heavy correlation. So there is bound to be an increase in the income level across, and you can see it in our rural growth. For example, the income levels as they grow, and when the infrastructure grows, the transportation requirement grows, and that is very positive. However, the short term, you can have multiple factors which can like derail the entire this thing. The direction generally seems to be upward. You could see up and downs on the way, as happens in any journey. So hopefully we should have a good
But just
growth.
One last question before I let you go. This whole rural narrative that you're talking about, I'd like to know the performance of automobile in rural India. Because if you look at the rural story, let's say in FMCG, right, which is most consumable and accessible to rural India, there itself there seems to be not a very vibrant outlook, right? People have been talking about the rural story recovering, but it's the green shoots we are seeing for a very long time. That story is just not coming up to speed and is not matching urban India. What is the story with automobile, which is a much more expensive item?
Here is the contradiction actually. If you look at last 15 years statistics, rural growth has been faster than urban growth for all the years except one, which was 2013, I think.
For automobile?
For automobile,
wow.
rural. Rural now is estimated in the industry to be roughly 31% of the total market. So it's still urban, 70% still urban. In Maruti's case, it's like 56-44 types.
Okay.
We are strong in the rural markets. Rural market this year so far has grown at around 11%, whereas the urban market has grown about 8.3. So in retail terms. So the overall growth being 8.5% for the industry. So it's growing fast, but the penetration of cars is very low in rural areas. And yes, you are right. When you look at the construct of the segments in the rural and the urban market, so there is a little bit of difference. So for example, the SUVs is still largely in urban areas. A lot of it is in urban area. I won't say largely, but a lot of it is in urban areas, more than the average penetration of cars in the urban. So it depends on the price. Price sensitivity is higher, and you are right. When the inflation goes up, actually the disposable income comes down because you will anyway spend on the essentials.
Yeah.
So the disposable income, and car buying is a discretionary item which is dependent on disposable income, not just the income levels. So I would say that it would be better going forward. And remember this conundrum of FMCG sales being tepid, whereas it's being strong for automobile, for example. I think the cars are actually appealing to a particular segment of rural, which is like much more richer than the average rural guy. And of course, a lot of rich farmers are there. There are a lot of other people who are, who can buy cars, and they seem to be less affected by the inflationary trends than the other part of the rural
top
market.
Of the pyramid of rural India is actually doing well, is serving well for the automobile
So we call
industry.
it Bharat. So the Bharat is, there is a Bharat, there is a India. So India, you have a India consumer who are a little different, and there is a Bharat, and both coexist. And you see sometimes the India also seeing some part of Bharat, and some part of Bharat is like India, and so it's like very interesting. Although as a marketer, I can say it gives me some sort of a sleepless nights, that how do you see this ever-changing scenario all the time, because it's so crucial. If you want to do well, your products have to do well in the market.
Absolutely. And I think being a marketer in today's day and age is probably the most complex thing ever. Couple of things that you find very challenging as a marketer with a positive connotation, and of course two very challenging things in negative connotation, before I let you go.
So I won't say negative or positive, but the pace at which the consumer choices are changing, the Gen Z and thing, the AI, now they call it the AI generation. That's like really rapid, and you have to be on your toes to understand.
Do you feel that too much is being made out of this?
Yeah, I think a little bit of that, but I think sometimes when some people make too much out of it, and I feel, yeah, this guy is making too much out of it, but then I feel maybe I don't know enough. So maybe this guy is knowing enough, and therefore he's making so much out of it, and I need to find out a little more to just to decide whether it's too much or too less. Therefore we do keep a lot of. The other thing is the technology itself changing. So you see powertrain technology like changing from gasoline to diesel to CNG to EVs to hybrids, and it's changing really rapidly, and you need to cope up with that as well. And there seems to be more volatility in terms of the prices, the cost structure, the prices of commodities, and all. There seems to be more volatility. These are, I would say, both positive and negative, because it makes you feel challenged, and then you try to put in your best, and that keeps you going. So I think that's the positive part. You have to be on your toes all the time, and of course you need to look at markets in a more micro sense rather than it's no longer it's more granular, it's more of a thing rather than just a uniform, slab.
One size fits all kind of thing.
It's not like that. So that's a big challenge, both positive and I think from a rest point of view, maybe negative, but from a challenge point of view, it's like really positive.
Well, Shashank, thank you so much for being so candid and sharing so many insights. I wish you and Maruti all the very best and much more power to you and Maruti going forward as we enter 24, 25 and this very, I would say, transitional phase, in terms of Motown specifically. But also, hats off and kudos to you on such a fantastic Maruti playbook in terms of actually being, with the consumer and mapping where they're going. So that's great. And it was absolutely lovely speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.